Okay, let's go ahead and read Walden, some excerpts from Walden by Henry David Thoreau, starting with from chapter 2 called Where I Lived and What I Lived For. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. I did not wish to live what was not life, living is so dear, nor did I wish to practice resignation unless it was quite necessary. I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life, to live so sturdily and Spartan-like as to put to rout all that was not life, to cut a broad swath and shave close, to drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms, and if it proved to be mean, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world, or if it were sublime, to know it by experience and be able to give a true account of it in my next excursion. For most men, it appears to me are in strange uncertainty about it, whether it is of the devil or of God, and have somewhat hastily concluded that it is the chief end of man here to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Okay, so first, why did Thoreau go to the woods? Well, it says it in the first line, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately. It says to front only the sun and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. He wanted a new experience. He didn't want to come to his deathbed, when I come to die, discover that I had not lived. So he doesn't want to miss anything in life. And so why did he go to the woods? Why did he decide to have a life that was different than the ordinary life? Because he wanted to make sure that he had truly experienced all aspects of life. He wanted to make sure that he wasn't missing out on something. So he goes and lives in the woods all by himself, because that is a different form of life than what he is used to, than what is ordinary, than what is kind of what everybody's used to. This is kind of a famous part where it says, I wanted to live deep and suck out all the marrow of life. If you guys know what marrow is, think of like bone marrow. That would be at the very center of the bone. So he wanted to get at the very center, at the very heart of life, and really experience it. He doesn't just want to scratch the surface. He doesn't just want to touch the skin of the body of life. He wants to suck out the bone marrow of life, really get at its core. This part I like too. If it proved to be mean, meaning if it turns out that I didn't like this experience, if it turns out that this experience really sucked, why then to get the whole and genuine meanness of it and publish its meanness to the world. Meaning if it turns out that this experience is terrible, well then at least I can be the one to publish it to the world. I can be the one to say that experience sucked and I know it from experience. Right? To get the whole and genuine meanness of it and to be able to say, I've done it and I know firsthand that it's terrible. And on the flip side of that, because usually we think of the flip side of that, if it were sublime, if this experience turns out to be the best thing ever, well then, guess what? I get to know it by experience and it's not secondhand, and to give a true account of it in my next excursion. I always think of like when students get their class lists over the summer and they look at all their teachers' names and they think, oh, I've seen that name before. I've heard bad things about that teacher. And then they try and switch out of that teacher's class if they can. That would not be what Henry David Thoreau does, because he would say, hey, I see that, there's a bad reputation here. I'm going to go discover that for myself, because then at least I can say it firsthand. If you never actually have the experience, you don't actually know whether something's good or bad. You're just going based off of secondhand information. And then in that case, are you really living your life? Or are you living someone else's? Or are you living and making choices based on someone else's life? And so I think that's what Thoreau is trying to get at here. Why did he go to the woods? Because he wanted to experience it, whether it was going to be good or bad. He wanted to experience something out of the ordinary and really, really get at that marrow of life. Let's continue on. Still, we live meanly, like ants, though the fable tells us that we were long ago changed into men. Like pygmies, we fight with cranes. It is error upon error and clout upon clout, and our best virtue has for its occasion a superfluous, inevitable wretchedness. Our life is frittered away by detail. An honest man has hardly need to count more than his 10 fingers, or in extreme cases he may add his 10 toes and lump the rest. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. I say, let your affairs be as 2 or 3, and not 100 or 1,000. Instead of 1,000,000, count half a dozen, and keep your accounts on your thumbnail. In the midst of this chopping sea of civilized life, such are the clouds and storms and quicksands, and 1,001 items to be allowed for that a man has to live, if he would not founder and go to the bottom and not make his port at all, by dead reckoning, and he must be a great calculator indeed who succeeds. Simplify, simplify. Instead of 3 meals a day, if it be necessary, eat but 1. Instead of 100 dishes, 5, and reduce other things in proportion. So at this point, I'd like you to go ahead and summarize this last paragraph that we just read. And by the way, I helped you summarize it by highlighting the passages that really get at the heart and core of it. So please summarize this second paragraph. Okay, again, I did highlight kind of the key points here. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. Simplify, simplify. One of the reasons he went to the woods to live a different life was not just, like I said, to experience life and get at the heart of it, but also to simplify his life. When you're out in the woods by yourself, there are fewer distractions there. There are fewer things to do. There are fewer things that you actually find that you need. I always think of other people's houses and how you'll open up a cabinet in their kitchen and you'll see mugs. I don't know what it is about coffee mugs. I guess people collect them. I don't know. But typically most houses I've seen, you open up one of the cabinets and it's just filled with mugs, right? Do you ever actually use every single one of those mugs? I know a few people that do. They like to rotate their mugs. But for the most part, we don't. We don't use everything that's in our cabinets, right? My husband and I, we have taken this whole simplicity or simplify thing to heart. We only have 2 mugs, one for him and one for me. And that's it. I don't know what my deal is with mugs, but I just always find that that's one of the best examples of how we have so much useless stuff in our house. It's not that it's useless, but we have too much of something to the point where the amount of it becomes useless, right? Coffee mugs are practical, but do you really need, 12 of them? Probably not, okay? Keep going. Time is but the stream I go a-fishing in. I drink at it, but while I drink, I see the sandy bottom and detect how shallow it is. Its thin current slides away, but eternity remains. I would drink deeper. Fish in the sky, whose bottom is pebbly with stars. I cannot count one. Okay, so what is it here that Thoreau is saying about time? Well, in the way that I summarized it over here, time is shallow, so make the most of it, right? He says, I would drink at it, and yet I see the bottom of it. I realize that we don't have that much time, and so that goes back to why is he here in the woods? Why did he decide to make a life by himself in Walden Pond all by himself? Because he wants to experience life, and he recognizes that, hey, I don't have that much time to do it. Okay, I don't have that much time to experience life, so I want to make sure that I get every experience I possibly can because time is shallow. Okay, let's keep going. From the conclusion, so now we're looking at chapter 8. We just talked about why he went to the woods. Now let's look at why he left. Okay, chapter 8. I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Perhaps it seemed to me that I had several more lives to live and could not spare any more time for that one. It is remarkable how easily and insensibly we fall into a particular route and make a beaten track for ourselves. I had not lived there a week before my feet wore a path from my door to the pond side, and though it is 5 or 6 years since I trod it, it is still quite distinct. It is true, I fear that others may have fallen into it and so helped to keep it open. The surface of the earth is soft and impressible by the feet of men, and so with the paths which the mind travels. How worn and dusty, then, must be the highways of the world, how deep the ruts of tradition and conformity. I did not wish to take a cabin passage, but rather to go before the mast and on the deck of the world, for there I could best see the moonlight amid the mountains. I do not wish to go below now. So, we talked about why Thoreau went to the woods. Now, why did he leave the woods? Well, as he said a little bit earlier, it says, I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Basically, the same reason he went to the woods is the same reason why he's leaving it. It says, I had several more lives to live and could not spare any more time for that one. Remember, he went to the woods in order to really get a good experience out of life, to experience something different. Well, now he's been there for quite a while. It says, I fell into a particular route there. I made a beaten track for myself there. I fell into the same same patterns. And so I had experienced that life. And now, just like I wanted to come to the woods to experience something new, he leaves the woods because this isn't new anymore, and he wants to experience something new. Let's keep going. I learned this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. He will put some things behind, will pass an invisible boundary. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him, or the old laws be expanded and interpreted in his favor in a more liberal sense, and he will live with the license of a higher order of beings. In proportion, as he simplifies his life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex, and solitude will not be solitude, nor poverty poverty, nor weakness weakness. If you've built castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now put the foundations under them. Okay, so what does Thoreau say will happen when we learn to live simply? Well, he says right here, as he simplifies his life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex. So as we actually declutter our lives, as we learn to live more simply, the world itself will become clearer. The world itself will become less muddy, less complex. That's what he says what will happen. Let's continue on. Why should we be in such desperate haste to succeed and in such desperate enterprises? If a man does not keep, actually, I'm going to stop real quick and explain. He's talking about how, like, we feel like so often we muddy up our life, we complicate our life in pursuit of doing everything the ordinary way, in pursuit of falling in line and coloring inside the lines and keeping our life in a nice little neat box that is the same as everybody else's. We always feel like we have to compare ourselves to everyone else, and that our measure of success is only successful based on a comparison to other people. But he says, why? Why do we do that? If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured or far away. By the way, that sounds probably very familiar. You should march to the beat of your own drum. It's a very transcendental idea, right? Be self-reliant, do your own thing. It is not important that he should mature as soon as an apple tree or an oak. Shall he turn his spring into summer? If the condition of things which we were made for is not yet, what were any reality which we can substitute? We will not be shipwrecked on a vain reality. Shall we with pains erect a heaven of blue glass over ourselves, though when it is done we shall be sure to gaze still at the true ethereal heaven far above, as if the former were not? However mean your life is, meet it and live it. Mean, by the way, meaning difficult, right? However difficult and different your life is, meet it and live it. Do not shun it and call it hard names. It's not so bad as you are. It looks poorest when you are richest. The fault finder will find faults even in paradise. Love your life, poor as it is. You may perhaps have some pleasant, thrilling, glorious hours even in a poorhouse. The setting sun is reflected from the windows of the almshouse, that means like the poorhouses, as brightly as from the rich man's abode. The snow melts before its door as early in the spring. By the way, all of these ideas are going back to this idea of simplifying, right? Simplify your life and you'll gain clarity. You'll realize that your situation with less is actually just fine, right? I do not see but a quiet mind may live as contentedly there as have as cheering thoughts as in a palace. The town's poor seem to me often to live the most independent lives of any. Maybe they are simply great enough to receive without misgiving. Most think that they are above being supported by the town, but it oftener happens that they are not above supporting themselves by dishonest means, which should be more disreputable. Cultivate poverty like a garden herb, like sage. Do not trouble yourself much to get new things, whether clothes or friends. Turn the old, return to them. Things do not change, we change. Sell your clothes and keep your thoughts. God will see that you do not want society. Okay, so very transcendental at the end. You do not want society. Do your own thing. Be happy with what you have. Sell your clothes. Material things just don't matter. Keep your thoughts because you are what matters, not necessarily your measure of success or how much you own. Okay, so that is some excerpts from Walden. I hope you liked them.